Well, thanks, Phil. And I think changing the world's probably overstating it a little bit, but we'll see what we can do. So appreciate having a few minutes to come talk with all of you about not only WebRTC, but how's WebRTC plus wearable technology, cloud, and a few other technologies interacting together to allow Phil and I to both talk simultaneously while I'm on stage, which is fabulous. Good. Nevertheless, how these are all coming together to really enable business processes to work a fundamentally different way going forward. So I was actually thinking about this the other day, kind of thinking about WebRTC, where it's going, as I talked with some of the standards people out here in the audience, people on my team. And you know, I've spent most of the last 25 years of my career involved in the unified communications industry. And I was thinking about the fact that for most of the time that unified communications has been going on, it's looked an awful lot like this. So up until the last few years, all of the time that I spent trying to build systems, interacting with everybody else, it was very much about desk phones, be they IP or TDM, conferencing phones, maybe a few laptops, a few early smartphones, and really that tablet probably doesn't belong on there. And I was thinking an awful lot about the architectures and what we were building. And you know, it occurred to me that one of the primary things we were always solving for in the communications industry at that time was scarcity. We were solving for scarce resources of one kind or another. We were solving for scarce bandwidth. We were solving for expensive endpoints that needed to be shared between people, needed to be reused between shifts. We were solving for scarce labor in that only a few people knew how to build communications applications. And with all of this, all of our time was spent trying to figure out how to lower IT costs. How do we create long-distance calls that are cheaper? How do we get into a conference call that costs a tiny bit less? And oh, by the way, if when we're done solving for scarcity, if there's a little bit left over for the end user, the few features that we actually built that were end user driven really wound up being around either fancy caller ID, letting people know who was calling, where they were calling from, things around presence-enabled buddy lists, so you could see if somebody was available before you called them, so you could understand what time zone people were in, perhaps do really high-end things like grab two people, right-click, and go into a three-party conference call. But it was all around this whole idea of scarcity. And you know, it occurred to me that a lot of what's changed over the last couple or 3 years, a lot of what I'm seeing out there in the industry, a lot of what I'm experiencing at Plantronics, is suddenly we've moved to a world of abundance. So while unified communications 1.0, if you will, was very much designed for that world, suddenly there's an explosion of devices. We don't got to worry about sharing anything, not really. We have an incredible number of communications devices, from IP phones to laptops to Chromebooks to tablets, on and on and on, and a ton of other devices out there proliferating in our life as well. From intelligent medical devices to sensors on the world around us, wearable tech, be it headsets or my Nike Fuel Band or the Fitbit that I wear on the other wrist sometimes, forgot it this morning. There's a million devices out there pumping information out at an endless rate. All this information is actually being pumped across a network that's ever more ubiquitous, ever more wireless, to a back-end cloud that has relatively infinite storage and relatively infinite processing, as long as you want it for short bursts, where tons of new analytics can pour over this data and attempt to find meaning. So we've hit a world where virtually everything in the communications sector is abundant or preparing to be abundant, except for human attention, except for our ability to internalize all this input and do something interesting with it. Now, there's a variety of companies out there, including the one I work for, that very much advocates that's what's missing in this equation is some sort of a wearable agent that works on behalf of the end user, that actually sorts through this proverbial haystack of information and devices and finds the things that are relevant to you today, relevant to you for exactly where you're sitting, exactly who you're near, and creates a whole new level of productivity. So we'll talk a little bit about that, but the first thing that I think has been missing for a while is what's the communications infrastructure for this world of abundance? Now that we have a fair amount of bandwidth, we have an incredible number of devices, we don't have to worry about sharing devices, we don't have to worry about sharing office space. What do things look like instead? Well, the good news is we need a communications infrastructure for this world. For this world where I'm walking down the street with 2 or 3 wearable devices on me, interacting with the billions of sensors that are on the building, in the home around me. In fact, depending upon who you believe, we're moving towards either 50 billion with a B internet-connected sensors in the world around us over the next 3 years, or we're moving towards 200 billion intermittently connected sensors that are on at least part of the time. So either way you want to look at it, we're moving into a world where there are several sensors, several IP-connected devices for every human being that's alive, all pushing data to the cloud, all ready to be interacted with by some piece of wearable tech on top of each one of us to create unprecedented new levels of productivity. Now, the question is, given that our old communications infrastructures were built primarily around a world of scarcity, what should the communications infrastructure for a world of abundance be? And the great news is, it does seem like WebRTC has a crack at being that. It really could. Why? Well, it solves a couple of problems. Some of the problems of scarcity that we had before get solved with WebRTC because, first of all, it solves the developer problem. We move from tens of thousands or low hundreds of thousands of developers that are capable of building a finite state machine in C++ around a SIP or a 323 stack, to tens of millions of developers that have the capability to go into a browser and build JavaScript in order to script up a communications application. One of the other huge problems we've all had in the past with unified communications was deployment. Well, we solve an awful lot of that. The people that are building WebRTC, by wedging the communications infrastructure into a browser, that's extremely clever for a lot of reasons. First of all, end users and IT have been programmed to update their browser multiple times per year. Browser is ubiquitously deployed. Browser gets updated on a fairly regular basis. It stays evergreen, if you will. Puts us in a position where we suddenly can start thinking like web people, not like telecom people. We can get the platform pretty close, get it in the field, and assume that there's a reasonable chance everybody's going to upgrade 2 or 3 times over the coming couple of years as we zero in on the bullseye of exactly what we need in the platform. Now, the actual applications that sit on top of it, of course, literally can be refreshed every time somebody goes to the web page. So once again, we don't have to think in the telco world of how do we get it completely perfect. We can think in the web world of zeroing in on the bullseye by rapidly iterating until we exactly satisfy our customers. Very, very exciting going forward. At the same time, though, this gives us the ability to really, as we have an abundant communications infrastructure on every single device out there, that is very, very easy to program to. People can script new applications really, really quickly around all this. It puts us in a position to fundamentally go rethink every process in our life. Every business process can now be thought of, how could we embed communications right in the flow in some way that is interesting to make the deal close faster, the deal be more accurate, the employee be more productive while being happier. And by the way, while we in theory could have done that before, it simply wasn't practical because it took too long, it needed too many scarce development resources, too many scarce computer resources. In other words, it was too expensive to chase the long tail. Instead, we wound up building just a few applications for each business, where now we could build dozens. Same thing for people that are on the road. It gives us the ability, we'll come back and talk about, to actually look at entertainment and gaming experiences where communications could make them much more immersive and engaging. The ability to think about interesting things around multi-device security where communications could be involved. So all of these things are candidates to be completely rethought and rebuilt in a world of abundance with the right communications infrastructure in place. So it's interesting though. Technology's great, but at the end of the day, it's all about people. It cuts both ways. People are both the opportunity. There's 7 billion people on the face of the earth. Somewhere around a quarter of them now have access to a reasonable device with a reasonable browser and reasonable connectivity. So that means we're in a position where something on the order of 1.5 billion or 2 billion people are fair game to be developed at with WebRTC over the next couple of years. That's pretty exciting. If that's not a target market, I don't know what is. We have the abundance of people that know how to develop once we push this into a browser, which is quite nice. But at the same time, the people are also, I dare not say the problem, but the people are the thing that needs brought along, okay? Anytime we have a phenomenal new technology, we actually do a lot better with evolution than revolution. Revolutions are really fun for the revolutionaries, but usually for the general populace, they prefer evolution, if you will. So let's take a look at some of the problems that go on with that. So what we're looking at here, we're taking a business setting, but it applies to any business. And this is a little bit what I'm hearing from our customers when I'm out there talking about WebRTC, wearable technology, new ways of building business processes. This is a pretty typical enterprise, right? On the right side, we have a bunch of enterprise workers sitting on their desks. Somewhere 3 or 4 years ago, they were probably given a unified communications system from Cisco or Avaya or Microsoft or ShoreTel or somebody. And they were told, you know, there's productivity in here somewhere. We don't know where it is. You figure it out. And they all dutifully did. They took their brand new IP phone, they took their soft phone, they took the collaboration tool, and slowly but surely they built it into their daily process. They figured out how they want to run their business around it, how they want to use it to do their weekly staff call, how they're going to use it to engage with their distributed sales force or whatever. So the end users are engaged, they're bought in. You know, then if we move to the left, we have the first of several people. So we got the IT guy there, and he's learned over time how to maintain this thing, how to make it sing and dance, how to move towards 5 nines in spite of the bugs in the software, how to upgrade it, when to upgrade it. He spent the time to get Microsoft or Microsoft, Cisco, Avaya certified, and he's built his career around this thing that went in 3 or 4 years ago. And then there's his boss. There's his boss, the telecom manager or the CIO, that went to the company a few years back and said, man, as soon as we put in this unified communication system, productivity is going to skyrocket, we're going to save money, and we're not going to have to upgrade for at least 10 years. It's going to be great. Well, and why did he say that? Well, he said that partially because that's what the vendor told him, where you've got the vendor sitting behind it, who's used to selling these systems, upgrading these systems, getting the maintenance revenue from all of these systems. And now we come in as a WebRTC industry, a WebRTC movement, with these brand new technologies that have the promise of building ever more productive applications in a browser on commodity-like devices for pennies on the dollar. So the interesting question is the right way to engage in this abundance. So now we can move from having a few applications that are communications enabled in every company to dozens or hundreds. But boy, how do you deal with the change management for those end users? How do you deal with the change management for that IT guy who's used to looking after half a dozen applications, and now there's dozens or hundreds out there? How does the compliance officer get comfortable that they understand about all the regulatory issues in this new world? Well, I would submit that the answer is probably not to say, let's all rip and replace one more time, out with the old and in with the new, and let's start over. Probably a much better idea is to look for ways, at least initially, that we integrate. How does WebRTC extend some of the investments that are already there? How do we look to a world where we're able to say, don't throw away what you've already got. Use this as a way of rapidly customizing, as a way of adding interesting click-to-call, interesting chat, interesting new workflows to what you already have. And as some of these servers start wearing out, as some of these people start retiring, there's an ability to move towards the center and replace the core. That doesn't feel very good to me as a technologist, but I must tell you that as I'm out talking to very, very big customers, they're desperate for people to come to them with that story. They're desperate for people to come to them and say, you know, if you're doing a forklift upgrade anyway, this is a great way to go. But if you're already invested in Cisco and Microsoft and in Avaya and BroadSoft and whatever, then here's how WebRTC integrates with all that, and then it rapidly integrates into business processes, creates stronger customer engagement models. I got to tell you that anybody that wants to bend their business around that, there's a bunch of very willing customers that are out there ready to listen over the next few years. So it's interesting, though, when I think about my world just this morning, I already have this mess on my hands where I got out of bed this morning at about 5 o'clock. I'm an early riser. And I opened my laptop, and I made the mistake of already having Skype up, already having a Facebook page up, already having my email up, and you know, I didn't get communicated with, I got mugged. All this crap started coming at me. I mean, literally, I had Oracle wanting me to approve 3 workflows, some other freaky system that we tend to use at Plantronics for some unknown reason, wanting me to approve expenses, people IMing me, 2 different people seeing that I was logged into Skype, one that's in Brazil, one that's in South Africa, all hammering me, wanting my attention at all times. My cell phone was going off because somebody in Europe knew I was an early riser. It was ugly. And if anything, the downside of an abundant communications infrastructure from something like WebRTC, the potential downside is that this gets better, not worse. There's 15 more communications-enabled applications able to see that I'm suddenly available, able to come my way, able to hammer on me, and there's nothing working on my behalf. So this is a little bit of where we think wearable tech could potentially be part of the solution going forward. We don't have all the answers. But there's a couple of things we've done. Some of our existing products already have a set of APIs where we can integrate all of these devices around. We can integrate all of these things into our APIs. I can put this thing on my head, and I can say, next item, and it'll at least put things through one at a time. You know, do you want to accept a call from Pam? No. Pam's our CFO. The answer is no. I don't want to talk to her. She's never calling to give me money. She's calling to take it away. Right. Do you want to accept a call from Pam? No. Do you want to review this ERP thing? Yes. Pushes it to my screen. I'm able to talk about it a little bit. You know, Scopia goes off. I see it's our friends at Avaya, so I say answer, and suddenly I'm on the call with India. It goes off, and I'm able to take the next one. At the same time, this seems pretty good. It's actually not amazing. It actually reminds me of the first thing that I was involved in unified communications. I helped write a unified messaging system, and it was supposed to be awesome. But what it actually wound up meaning was, you know, instead of having 250 messages in 3 different inboxes, I had 750 messages in 1 inbox. Incremental move in the right direction, but doesn't actually help me too much. So we think we can do better over time. So where do we come in? Where does the world of wearable tech and sensors come in? Well, you know, some of the work we've been doing is literally loading some of these guys up with all kinds of information. If you think about it, a piece of technology that's on your body actually knows an awful lot about you. It actually has a very privileged position in your life. So what kind of sensors are we loading up? Well, going to the most extreme, a little bit of latency, going to the most extreme, we actually have out a piece of beta hardware people can get their hands on that has real-time device orientation stream. Okay, it has head tracking. So literally, I put this guy on my head, and as I'm moving in 9 different axes, it's actually pumping back the position of my head and the movement in near real time, either back to the client software or all the way to the cloud and exposing it through an API. It has fall detection. So if it feels it fall like that, it's able to radio back that event. It knows if it's on my head or not, donned off, if you will. Has a pedometer, it has tap detection, so I can do things around gestures. It knows if I'm nodding no or if I'm nodding yes. And yes, those can be reversed for cultures that do it the opposite. On and on and on, lots of things. It knows if it's near or far from various devices. So exactly what should we do with all these things? I don't know. I'll tell you one that I already built with it. Some of the people out here know me. I am the world's worst athlete, and I won't admit it. Okay, so I still go out and mountain bike places that I shouldn't, and I still wreck a lot. So I actually took one of these, and with the help of a couple of people, wrote a little application that uses the donned off plus the fall detection, and works really simply. If headset, so first of all, I get to the top of the hill on my bike, I push the command button, and I say, watch me, and it says, watching. And then I ride down the hill, and if fall detect and what warn, then gee, the headset fell and my head must have fell with it, okay? And when that comes on, I get a nice little prompt in my ear that says, I detected a fall. Press cancel in the next 30 seconds, or I'm going to call 911 with your current location. Okay, dumb application, but it shows the capabilities of what can be built going forward. So how would you use all of these things together? Well, a few things. First of all, the hope is that where I was getting hammered by all of those things, that we can take the 20 or 30 things that was hammering on me this morning, and we can take it down to the 5 or 6 that are relevant at this moment. Given that I'm near my computer looking at it, I have these particular applications open, and this is what's in my calendar. Can we filter about 80% of that crap out and get down to the things I actually could deal with at the moment? I think the answer is probably. So how do we reimagine all these different workflows? Well, we have some ideas. Let's talk about the 2 ladies up in the corner that seem to be working on some sort of a business process. Not too far in the future, with wearable tech, you might imagine that we have a pretty good ability to take the lady that's sitting down and understand how she moves her head, how she moves her body, what's her temperature, her perspiration rate, etc., when she's in a good mood, when she's engaged, etc. And we can have a pretty good idea what it looks like when she's agitated, when she's under stress. Actually, turns out this isn't very hard, okay? Maybe to get it perfect is hard, but to get a decent idea isn't. So, as she's on the phone with this high net worth client doing her thing, we're sensing stress. We're sensing through some combination of the way she's moving her body, the way she's shifting around, her temperature going up a little bit, perhaps a little bit of voice print, all these being weak signals, but when you put them all together, you get to a strong one. You get the idea that this is a call going south. So, boom. Call goes into the queue of ongoing distressed calls. The supervisor that's walking the floor actually then gets a notification that, Sally's on a call and might need a little help. She takes her touch detection and says, I got it. Starts walking over. As she gets near Sally's cube, she automatically gets conferenced in because we get a near event. She gets conferenced in supervisor mode. So she can hear the ongoing call. Sally can hear her as a whisper page, but the customer can't hear her, and she can help turn this call around or give training on the fly. You got the sales guy out on the go, so you got the ability to suddenly, with all of this tech, understand when the customer's calling in on his cell phone, if his laptop is also open, then let's pull the caller ID off the cell phone, take it through the wearable tech over to the laptop, and do a Salesforce.com screen pop so the customer order is up before he ever even answers the call. The ability in a gaming type kind of scenario, and we've actually prototyped some of this, it's kind of cool. The ability to use head tracking in a first-person shooter to make it more immersive. So where I'm looking is where the soldier is looking. In a motorcycle game, as you lean, to actually be able to lean around the track. Interesting possibilities around biofeedback and whatnot, where literally we can look at the heart rate and the level of engagement and feed it back into the game so it can be adaptive in order to suck the user in a little bit more, as if your children aren't addicted enough to games already. On and on and on. The ability to use a ubiquitous data channel across all of these browsers for distributed security type applications that might look at interesting ideas. So, back to that weak signal idea with all this password mess. All right. So if I put my headset on, or my other wearable device this morning, if I put it on inside Joe's house, while I was close to Joe's cell phone and Joe's laptop, and then I made a couple of calls to people Joe usually makes calls to, and I sounded a little bit like Joe, and then I got in a car and I drove to places Joe usually drives, and I went into a locked building that Joe usually goes into. For goodness sakes, it's Joe, okay? How does all of this get rolled up and used as a whole bunch of weak security factors that can allow us to have very strong security somewhere in the future being pumped around between all these devices over some of the communications infrastructure we're talking about today? The answer is, I don't know the answer to all of that. I know that WebRTC plus wearable tech plus cloud plus a couple of other things allows for some unprecedented possibilities over the next couple of years. The good news is we understand we don't know how to do all this. We're an enabler, for goodness sakes. Headsets and other wearable devices are a piece of the pie. They don't drive, okay? What we've done at Plantronics that I'm so pleased about is create two different ways of engaging in a conversation with the developer community, with the customer community, and with people at large. First of all, we created a year and a half or so ago, developer.plantronics.com. This is the Plantronics developer community that allows people to write applications to the APIs around our shipping products. So there's hundreds of millions of Plantronics out there in the world. Many of them are API enabled, not all, but the ones that are, you can actually come to developer.plantronics.com, download our SDK, download sample code. A great example is a year and a half ago, we actually posted all of the source code that was required to actually integrate our intelligent headsets with WebRTC inside a Mozilla browser. You can go there today and take our shipping products plus a Mozilla browser plus a little bit of free source code we have, and have the headset set up so you can answer calls, send presence information through the data channel between browsers, on and on and on. Now, a few months ago, we decided to go one step over the horizon and create a place where we can engage about the future. So PLT Labs and pltlabs.com is where we look a little bit farther afield. PLT Labs is where we've started releasing beta concept hardware that we don't exactly know what to do with. So we've released concept one of a new wearable device that's laden with all that head tracking, fall detection, this, that, and the other. And we've actually created a place for people to come co-create with us, register to get their hands on these devices so we can explore all those future use cases together and decide what to bring to market. So that's at pltlabs.com. You can find just a ton of information from Kerry Brand, our Senior Director of Innovation, and I think he's on the closing panel tomorrow and around here today. You can engage with him, with others on the team. You can find me, and we can explore all these topics together. So that's kind of it for me. I wanted to come in and talk just a minute about how WebRTC in this world of abundance, there we go, clicker's a little funny, how WebRTC in this world of abundance actually creates a fundamentally different way of thinking of communications. We don't have to design around scarcity. We don't have to design around PBX kinds of mindsets, around normal vendor kinds of release cycles. But we are, at some point, abundance becomes confusion, and we need to look for things that can help personalize that to all of us. And we think at Plantronics we can be a tiny part of making that happen. So, it kind of feels like, we're standing in a pretty good place in the industry today. There's an even cooler place out there in the distance, but there's a little bit of a bridge between here and there. As I'm out talking to customers, the two things that I'm hearing are, think of it as a bridge, not a chasm to be leapt. Think of it as, how do you bring us along? How do you bring along our investments? How do you incrementally show us how to get an increasing amount of value out of this new world? And be very, very careful to think about the human change management problem as you go through it. And I think if we do that, we're all going to wind up someplace very, very cool together, and it's going to be a compelling world. So thank you very much. I'll be around the rest of the day.